Flashing red and blue lights cut through the midnight rain. A patrolman with a chip on his shoulder shoved a quiet man against a rusted gas pump, demanding ID for absolutely no reason. He thought he caught an easy target. He didn't know he just handcuffed the director of the FBI. The relentless November rain had washed the streets of Blackwood, New Jersey, into a slick, black mirror. At 1:15 a.m., the isolated Sunoco station on Route 42 was nothing more than an island of harsh, flickering fluorescent light in an ocean of darkness. Arthur Sterling stood by pump number 4. He was 59 years old, a tall, broad-shouldered black man with silver dusting his temples. Tonight, he wasn't wearing his customary tailored wool suit. Instead, he was dressed for comfort: a faded gray zip-up hoodie, dark denim jeans, and a pair of worn-in boots. He had spent the evening driving back from Philadelphia after a quiet dinner with his daughter, and the long drive had left him stiff and craving a bitter cup of black coffee. As the fuel nozzle clicked, Arthur pulled his collar up against the biting wind. He didn't notice the black and white cruiser creeping into the station's lot right away. Inside that cruiser sat Officer Derek Connolly. At 28 years old, Connolly had been on the Blackwood force for just under 4 years. In that short time, he had amassed an uncomfortable number of civilian complaints, most involving aggressive behavior, unwarranted searches, and a general air of absolute, unchecked authority. His union representative, a grizzled veteran named Hank Peterson, had always managed to sweep the paperwork under the rug. Consequently, Connolly operated under the dangerous delusion of invincibility. Connolly was bored. The shift had been dead, and the rain had kept the usual troublemakers indoors. As he pulled around the side of the convenience store, his headlights washed over Arthur. To Connolly, the sight of a black man in a hoodie at a gas station after midnight triggered an immediate, prejudiced instinct. He didn't see a citizen pumping premium gasoline into a late-model, immaculate Ford Expedition. He saw an opportunity to exercise dominance. Connolly threw the cruiser into park, angling it aggressively to block Arthur's vehicle from the front. He didn't turn on his sirens, but he hit the light bar. The sudden explosion of red and blue strobes painted the wet asphalt and reflecting off the gas pumps. Arthur slowly turned his head. His expression didn't change. Decades of high-stakes, life-or-death decision-making had trained him to keep his heart rate steady under pressure. He calmly finished topping off his tank, replaced the nozzle, and screwed his gas cap shut. The cruiser door slammed shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet night. "Hey, you, put your hands where I can see them," Connolly barked, his hand resting casually but purposefully on the butt of his service weapon. He strode through the puddles, his boots splashing loudly, projecting an aura of hostility. Arthur turned fully to face the officer. He kept his hands visible, resting them lightly on the side of his SUV. "Good evening, officer," Arthur said. His voice was a deep, resonant baritone, smooth and completely devoid of panic. "Is there a problem?" "I'll ask the questions," Connolly snapped, stopping a few feet away, invading Arthur's personal space. The cop's eyes darted over the vehicle, looking for anything: a broken taillight, expired tags, anything to justify the stop. The Ford was spotless. Its registration was current. Frustrated, Connolly locked eyes with Arthur. "What are you doing here?" "Pumping gas," Arthur replied, his tone remaining perfectly level. "And I was about to go inside to purchase a coffee." "Where are you coming from?" Connolly demanded. "Visiting family in Philadelphia. I'm heading home." "Home where?" "Alexandria, Virginia." Connolly scoffed, a wet, ugly sound. "Long drive at 1 a.m. Let me see your ID." Arthur didn't move toward his pockets. He simply looked at the young officer. He knew the law. He knew it intimately, better than almost anyone in the country. "Officer, am I suspected of committing a crime?" Connolly's jaw tightened. He despised being questioned. He was used to civilians trembling, stammering, and rushing to comply. This man's icy composure felt like a direct insult. I said, "Let me see your ID. I need to know who you are, and if you have any outstanding warrants." Under the Fourth Amendment, and according to the laws of this state, you need reasonable, articulable suspicion that I am committing, have committed, or am about to commit a crime to demand my identification. Arthur stated calmly. Have I committed a traffic violation? Is my vehicle matching the description of a crime in the area? Connolly's face flushed red, the anger rising quickly to the surface. Listen to me, tough guy. You're loitering at a closed-down-looking gas station in the middle of the night. The station is open, officer. Arthur interrupted gently, nodding toward the brightly lit convenience store window where a clerk was clearly visible behind the register. Off to the side, a young woman in medical scrubs, a night shift nurse named Sarah Jenkins, had just walked out with a soda, freezing in her tracks as she witnessed the confrontation. "Don't interrupt me," Connolly shouted, taking a step closer. The smell of cheap cologne and stale spearmint gum wafted off him. "You look suspicious. You're acting evasive. Now, you're going to give me your driver's license, or I'm going to pull you out of those clothes and find it myself. Do you understand me?" Arthur's eyes narrowed slightly, a microscopic shift in his otherwise stoic demeanor. He wasn't just a man who knew the law. He was a man who had dedicated his life to enforcing it with integrity. Seeing a badge used as a tool for bullying disgusted him to his core. "I am not acting evasive," Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave, carrying the weight of unquestionable authority. "I am politely asserting my constitutional rights. I will not provide my identification without a lawful basis for you to demand it. If I am not being detained, I would like to get in my vehicle and leave." "You aren't going anywhere," Connolly roared. He lunged forward, grabbing Arthur roughly by the shoulder of his hoodie and spinning him around. He slammed Arthur chest first against the side of the Ford Expedition. The metal groaned under the impact. By the store entrance, Sarah Jenkins gasped. Her hands shook, but instinct took over. She pulled out her iPhone and hit record, the red dot blinking in the darkness, capturing every second of the abuse. Stop resisting," Connolly yelled. It was a tactical phrase, shouted not because Arthur was moving. He was completely compliant, holding himself perfectly still against the cold metal of his SUV, but because Connolly wanted the audio to reflect a struggle that wasn't happening. "I am not resisting, officer," Arthur said clearly, his cheek pressed against the wet glass of his own car window. "I am entirely compliant. Note for your body camera, if it is activated, that I am not fighting back." Connolly kicked Arthur's legs apart roughly. He dragged a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt. "You want to play lawyer? Fine. You're under arrest for obstruction of justice and disorderly conduct." The cold steel clamped down hard on Arthur's left wrist. Connolly wrenched the arm behind Arthur's back, pushing the joint to the edge of pain, before snapping the right cuff into place. He ratcheted them down tight. Too tight. It was a petty, vindictive punishment meant to cause maximum discomfort. "Patting you down," Connolly muttered, aggressively running his hands over Arthur's pockets. He felt the heavy leather wallet in Arthur's back right pocket, but deliberately left it there. He wanted to make a show of emptying the man's pockets back at the precinct in front of the other guys. It was part of the humiliation ritual. Connolly grabbed Arthur by the back of his hoodie and shoved him toward the cruiser. "Get in." Arthur ducked his head, climbing into the cramped, hard plastic back seat of the patrol car. He sat in the darkness, feeling the cold rain drip from his hair down his neck. He didn't say a word. He didn't threaten Connolly. He didn't scream about who he was. Arthur Sterling was a master tactician. He knew that the most devastating way to destroy a corrupt officer was to let him walk willingly into his own trap, fully confident, until the jaws slammed shut. Connolly climbed into the driver's seat, breathing heavily, entirely satisfied with himself. He radioed dispatch. "Unit 4, got a non-compliant male. Transporting one to Central for booking. Obstruction. The drive to the precinct took less than 10 minutes. Connolly spent the entire ride looking in the rearview mirror, trying to bait his prisoner. "Not so talkative now, are we?" Connolly sneered. "Thought you knew the law. Let me tell you something, buddy. Out here on the street, I am the law. You think you can talk down to me? You're going to spend the weekend in a holding cell smelling like piss, and on Monday, a judge is going to laugh at your little civil rights speech." Arthur remained completely silent, his eyes fixed on the rain washing over the windshield. The Blackwood Police Department was a squat, brick building that smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. Connolly hauled Arthur out of the back of the cruiser and marched him through the double doors into the booking area. Behind the high front desk sat Sergeant Tom Higgins. Higgins was 50, tired, counting the days to his pension, and generally exhausted by Connolly's constant drama. "What do you have now, Derek?" Higgins sighed, barely looking up from his computer monitor. "Got a wise guy," Connolly bragged loudly, pushing Arthur toward the booking counter. Refused to identify himself. Combative, obstruction, and disorderly. Higgins finally looked up. He took in the sight of the older, dignified black man standing in wet clothes, his hands cuffed tightly behind his back. Higgins frowned. The man didn't look combative. He looked remarkably composed, almost unnervingly calm. "All right," Higgins said, standing up. "Let's get his property on the counter." "Sir, what is your name?" Arthur spoke for the first time since the gas station. "My wallet is in my back right pocket. I suggest you look at it." Connolly smirked. "See? Now he wants to cooperate." "Too late for that." Connolly stepped behind Arthur, roughly reached into the back pocket of the jeans, and yanked out the leather wallet. He tossed it onto the metal counter in front of Sergeant Higgins with a loud smack. "Have at it, Sarge." Higgins picked up the wallet. It was heavier than a normal billfold. Thicker. He flipped it open. There was no driver's license in the front window. Instead, there was a heavy, gleaming, solid gold shield. Above the shield, encased in thick, tamper-proof laminate, was a federal identification card. It bore the seal of the United States Department of Justice. Higgins blinked. He took his reading glasses off the chain around his neck and slid them onto his nose. He looked at the photo. Then he looked at the name. Finally, his eyes drifted down to the bold, capitalized title printed beneath. Arthur C. Sterling, Director, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The blood drained from Sergeant Higgins's face so fast he felt dizzy. His stomach plummeted into his shoes. The air in the booking room suddenly felt incredibly thin. He looked from the wallet to the man standing handcuffed in his lobby. The silver hair, the calm, piercing eyes, the absolute stillness. Higgins recognized him now from the news briefings in Washington. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a fake badge. Derek Connolly had just violently arrested, assaulted, and illegally detained the most powerful law enforcement officer in the United States of America. "Derek," Higgins whispered. His voice was trembling. "Derek, what did you do?" "What?" Connolly laughed, oblivious. "Just a routine lockup, Sarge. Guy thought he was a lawyer." "Derek, shut up!" Higgins snapped, his voice cracking with sheer panic. He grabbed a set of handcuff keys from his belt, practically sprinting around the desk. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped the keys twice. "Sarge, what are you doing?" Connolly protested, stepping forward. "He's under arrest. Back away from him, Connolly. Back away right now." Higgins roared, a sound of absolute terror that finally made Connolly freeze. Higgins reached Arthur and frantically unlocked the steel cuffs. "Sir, Director, Oh my God, sir, I am so sorry. I am so incredibly sorry." Connolly stood frozen. "Director, what are you talking about?" Arthur brought his arms forward, slowly rubbing the deep, red indentations in his wrists where the steel had bitten into his skin. He didn't look at Higgins. He turned his head slowly, locking eyes with the arrogant young cop. "Officer Connolly," Arthur said, his voice cold enough to freeze the room. "I am Director Arthur Sterling of the FBI, and you and I are going to have a very, very long conversation about the United States Constitution." Connolly's jaw went slack. The smugness vanished, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated dread as his entire career, his entire life, began to flash before his eyes. The silence inside the Blackwood Police Department booking room was absolute. broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights and the shallow, panicked breathing of Officer Derek Connolly. Sergeant Tom Higgins stood frozen behind the desk, clutching the gold FBI badge as if it were a live grenade. He had been a cop for 28 years. He had seen riots, hostage situations, and gruesome accidents. But he had never felt the profound, cold dread that was currently paralyzing his nervous system. Arthur Sterling, the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, stood before them in his damp gray hoodie and jeans. He didn't shout. He didn't throw a tantrum. He simply rubbed his bruised wrists and looked at Connolly with an expression of clinical dissection. "Sergeant Higgins," Arthur said, his voice a low, commanding rumble that seemed to vibrate the very walls. "I want you to place a phone call. Wake your chief of police. Tell him to get down here immediately. Then, I want you to secure Officer Connolly's body camera, his dashcam footage, and the surveillance drives for this room. Chain of custody begins right now." "Yes, sir." "Right away, Director," Higgins stammered, frantically reaching for his desk phone. Connolly finally found his voice. It came out as a pathetic, high-pitched squeak. "Director, I didn't know. You didn't tell me who you were. Ignorance of my identity does not excuse the violation of my constitutional rights, officer," Arthur replied, his eyes locking onto Connolly like laser sights. "You didn't assault the director of the FBI tonight. You assaulted a citizen. The badge in my pocket is irrelevant to the fact that you lacked reasonable suspicion, probable cause, and basic human decency. You operated under the assumption that your uniform shielded you from the law. You were incorrect." Connolly took a step backward, bumping into a plastic waiting chair. His arrogance had completely evaporated, replaced by the terrifying realization that his life was disintegrating in real time. "I was just doing my job. Following protocol for suspicious activity. We will let the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division determine your adherence to protocol," Arthur said smoothly. Within 20 minutes, the front doors of the precinct burst open. Chief Robert Harrison, a stout man in his early 60s, rushed in wearing a hastily buttoned uniform shirt over sweatpants. He was pale, sweating profusely despite the November chill. Behind him, the glass doors revealed a scene straight out of a Hollywood thriller. 3 matte black Chevrolet Suburbans had sealed off the precinct's parking lot. Heavily armed federal agents from the Philadelphia field office, dressed in tactical gear with bold yellow FBI lettering across their backs, were already securing the perimeter. The cavalry hadn't just arrived. They had occupied the building. Special Agent in charge William Brentwood, a sharp-featured man with ice-blue eyes, strode into the lobby right behind Chief Harrison. He took one look at Arthur's bruised wrists and turned his glare toward the local police. "Director Sterling, are you injured?" Brentwood asked, his tone clipped and professional. "Just some soft tissue damage, Bill. Nothing a cold compress won't fix," Arthur replied calmly. "Chief Harrison, thank you for joining us at this late hour." Chief Harrison looked like he was going to vomit. "Director Sterling, words cannot express. I am utterly appalled. This is not how the Blackwood Police Department operates. The evidence suggests otherwise, Chief," Arthur noted dryly. "Agent Brentwood, please relieve Officer Connolly of his duty weapon, his badge, and his credentials. He is currently under federal investigation for deprivation of rights under color of law." "You can't do this!" Connolly panicked as 2 federal agents stepped forward, their faces like stone. "Chief, tell them, I'm Union. Hank Peterson is my rep. You can't just strip my badge without a hearing." "Shut your mouth, Derek," Chief Harrison snarled, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. "Hand over your weapon right now." With shaking hands, Connolly unbuckled his gun belt and handed it to Agent Brentwood. The heavy clunk of the Glock hitting the metal evidence table sounded like a gavel falling. "Furthermore," Arthur continued, turning back to Chief Harrison, "a witness at the gas station, a civilian nurse named Sarah Jenkins, was recording the entire interaction on her mobile device. My agents have already located her. She has willingly handed over the unedited video. It is securely logged in federal evidence." Connolly's knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of a chair to keep from collapsing onto the linoleum floor. A witness. A video. The body cams. It was a perfect, inescapable snare. He looked around the room, searching for a sympathetic face, but found only the hardened stares of federal agents and the disgusted glare of his own commanding officer. He was entirely, utterly alone. By 8 a.m. on Monday morning, the storm broke. Sarah Jenkins had provided her video to the FBI, but she had also quietly sent a backup copy to a prominent civil rights attorney in Philadelphia before the feds knocked on her door. The attorney leaked it to a major national news network. The video was pristine. It clearly showed Arthur Sterling, calm and compliant, asserting his rights. It showed Officer Derek Connolly's aggressive escalation, the physical assault, and the sheer, unprovoked violence of slamming a compliant man against an SUV. The internet exploded. The phrase "Blackwood cop assaults citizen" trended instantly, but within hours, the true identity of the victim leaked to the press. The headline morphed into a global sensation. Rogue cop violently arrests undercover FBI director. The town of Blackwood was besieged. News vans clogged Route 42. Helicopters circled the police department. The mayor's office switchboard crashed from the sheer volume of furious callers. Inside the Philadelphia FBI field office, Arthur Sterling sat at a polished mahogany conference table, wearing his customary tailored wool suit. Across from him sat Assistant Attorney General Catherine Miller from the DOJ's Civil Rights Division, flanked by a team of federal prosecutors. "We have the body cam footage, Arthur," Catherine Miller said, projecting the video onto the screen. "It corroborates the witness video perfectly. Connolly's own audio is a textbook example of illegal detention and excessive force. But we dug deeper. This was the twist Connolly never saw coming. In his panic, he had assumed this was an isolated disaster. He had prayed his union representative, Hank Peterson, would negotiate a quiet resignation. But the FBI doesn't just look at the surface. They rip up the floorboards. When we seized the precinct's servers, we ran a full audit on Connolly's digital footprint," Agent Brentwood explained, sliding a thick file across the table. "Connolly has a pattern. He's been targeting minorities and out-of-state drivers late at night for 3 years. But it gets worse. He's been extorting them." Arthur's eyes narrowed. "Define extorting." "He would find minor, often fabricated infractions," Brentwood continued. "He'd threaten to impound their vehicles or arrest them on bogus charges unless they paid him on-the-spot roadside fines in cash. We found deleted text messages to a burner phone coordinating the deposits. We also found dashcam footage he thought he had permanently wiped from the server. So he wasn't just a bully," Arthur said, his voice laced with cold disgust. "He was running a shakedown racket under the protection of a badge." "Exactly," Catherine Miller nodded. "And the union? Hank Peterson?" Peterson saw the writing on the wall. Brentwood smirked slightly. "The moment we showed him the extortion evidence, Peterson cut a deal. He flipped on Connolly entirely to save his own pension. He admitted to helping Connolly bury at least 14 civilian complaints over the last 4 years. Back in Blackwood, Derek Connolly was sitting in his modest living room, staring at the television in horror. His face was plastered across every news channel. His phone hadn't stopped ringing, but it wasn't friends calling to support him. It was reporters, angry citizens, and death threats. Then came the knock on the door. It wasn't a polite tap. It was a heavy, authoritative pounding that rattled the hinges. Connolly opened the door to find 4 federal marshals standing on his porch, federal warrants in hand. "Derek Connolly," the lead marshal stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "You are under arrest for deprivation of rights under color of law, federal extortion, wire fraud, and tampering with evidence. Step outside and place your hands behind your back." As the cold steel of the handcuffs bit into his wrists, a haunting echo of what he had done to Arthur Sterling just 48 hours prior, Connolly broke down. He sobbed openly as his neighbors stood on their lawns, watching the local menace being dragged away in disgrace. But the criminal charges were only the first hammer blow. The second was financial annihilation. Arthur Sterling did not need money. But he knew that the only way to force systemic change in a corrupt municipal system was to hit them where it hurt the most: the Treasury. Through a proxy legal team, Arthur filed a massive civil rights lawsuit against Officer Derek Connolly, personally, Sergeant Tom Higgins, for failure to supervise, Chief Robert Harrison, and the township of Blackwood. The sum demanded was a staggering $2.5 million. The town's insurance company took one look at the viral video, the federal extortion charges, and the target of the assault, and immediately voided Blackwood's liability coverage, citing intentional criminal acts by the officer. The town was completely exposed. To avoid a drawn-out trial that would humiliate them further and likely result in a much larger jury verdict, the Blackwood City Council capitulated. They settled the lawsuit for the full $2.5 million. As part of the settlement, Chief Harrison was forced into early, disgraced retirement without his full pension. Sergeant Higgins was demoted to desk duty permanently, and Derek Connolly was held personally liable for a portion of the settlement, effectively bankrupting him for the rest of his natural life. Arthur Sterling didn't keep a single dime of the money. In a highly publicized press conference in Washington, D.C., he announced that the entire $5 million would be placed into an irrevocable trust. This fund, Arthur announced to the flashing cameras, his posture straight and unyielding, will be exclusively dedicated to providing top-tier legal representation for victims of police brutality and racial profiling in the state of New Jersey. It will also fund independent, civilian-led oversight committees to ensure that the men and women who wear the badge remember that they serve the people, not themselves. Derek Connolly watched that press conference from a federal holding cell. Stripped of his badge, his freedom, his money, and his pride, he finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. He had gone hunting for a victim to make himself feel powerful. Instead, he had caught a leviathan that dragged him down into the crushing depths of absolute ruin. 4 months later, the media circus had officially moved from the streets of Blackwood to the Mitchell H. Cohen Building and U.S. Courthouse in Camden, New Jersey. The skies were a clear, crisp blue, but inside courtroom 4A, the atmosphere was suffocatingly heavy. Derek Connolly sat at the defense table. He had lost 20 pounds. The swaggering, broad-shouldered predator who had patrolled Route 42 inches, a custom-tailored uniform, was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out, pale man in an oversized, drab olive jail jumpsuit. His wrists and ankles were shackled with heavy steel, a constant, chilling reminder of the very restraints he had so eagerly snapped onto innocent citizens. Presiding over the case was Honorable Judge Eleanor Harding, a jurist known for her razor-sharp intellect and absolute intolerance for public corruption. The federal prosecutors, led by Catherine Miller, had built a watertight case. Faced with his own body camera footage, deleted extortion texts recovered by the FBI, and the flipped testimony of his union representative, Connolly's defense attorney had strongly advised him to plead guilty to all 7 federal charges. Connolly had complied, desperately hoping for mercy. Before the sentencing was handed down, Arthur Sterling was called to the podium to deliver a victim impact statement. The courtroom fell utterly silent. Sterling wore a charcoal pinstripe suit, looking every bit the formidable institution he represented. But when he spoke, he didn't speak as the director of the FBI. "Your Honor," Arthur began, his resonant voice carrying easily to the back rows of the gallery, which were packed with local residents and journalists. "On the night of November 14th, I was not targeted because I am the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I was targeted because I was a black man in a hooded sweatshirt at a gas station after midnight." Officer Connolly did not see a citizen to protect. He saw a demographic to exploit. Arthur turned slightly, his piercing gaze locking directly onto Connolly. The former cop flinched, unable to maintain eye contact. "The badge we give our law enforcement officers is a sacred contract," Arthur continued. "It comes with the authority to detain, to use force, and to take away a person's liberty. When a man like Derek Connolly weaponizes that contract to feed his own ego and line his own pockets, he doesn't just assault an individual. He assaults the very foundation of the American justice system." He breeds a cancer of mistrust that makes the job of every honest cop infinitely more dangerous. I am asking the court to excise this cancer completely. Judge Harding nodded slowly. She adjusted her glasses and looked down at Connolly, her expression devoid of any sympathy. "Mr. Connolly," Judge Harding stated, her voice clipping through the silent room like a whip. "You took an oath to uphold the Constitution. Instead, you treated it as a suggestion. You used your cruiser as a pirate ship, stopping out-of-state drivers and local minorities, fabricating charges, and extorting them for cash. When you encountered a man who peacefully knew his rights, your immediate response was violence. The irony that you unwittingly assaulted the chief federal law enforcement officer in the nation is not lost on this court. It simply exposed the rot that was already there." She picked up her gavel. "For the charges of deprivation of rights under color of law, wire fraud, and extortion, I sentence you to 144 months, 12 years in federal prison. This sentence will be served without the possibility of early parole. Furthermore, you are permanently barred from holding any position of public trust, law enforcement, or private security for the rest of your natural life." Crack. The gavel hit the sounding block. Connolly's knees gave out, and he had to be physically supported by the U.S. Marshals as he was dragged back to the holding cells. 2 weeks later, the steel doors of the Federal Correctional Institution, FCI Schuylkill, slammed shut behind inmate #height 499 to 050 because Connolly was a former police officer. Placing him in the general population of a high-security penitentiary was a guaranteed death sentence. Instead, the Bureau of Prisons placed him in a specialized protective custody unit for dropouts, informants, disgraced politicians, and dirty cops. Connolly thought he would at least find some camaraderie among his own kind. He was entirely wrong. Even among disgraced cops, a man who extorted working-class people on the side of the highway was considered bottom-of-the-barrel scum. He was isolated, shunned, and paranoid, but the true, crushing weight of karma did not come from violence. It came from bureaucracy and a ghost from his past. To maintain order and offset the costs of incarceration, all federal inmates are required to work. Given his utter lack of specialized skills outside of bullying civilians, Connolly was assigned to the kitchen detail. His specific job was sanitation, scrubbing the massive industrial grease traps and scouring the scorched baking sheets. On his third day of work, Connolly was on his hands and knees in a puddle of gray, foul-smelling dishwater, furiously scrubbing a steel grate. A pair of heavy black boots stopped right in front of his face. Connolly looked up. Standing over him, wearing the crisp, white uniform of the inmate kitchen supervisor, was a man in his early 40s with intricate tattoos running up his neck. Connolly's blood ran cold. The face was older, hardened by years behind bars, but he recognized it immediately. It was Hector Ramirez. 3 years prior, Hector had been a single father, driving home from a late shift at a warehouse. Connolly had pulled him over for a swerving violation that never happened. When Hector couldn't pay the $400 cash bribe Connolly demanded on the side of the road, Connolly tore his car apart, found a legally registered firearm in the locked trunk, and falsely claimed Hector had reached for it. The resulting felony charge violated Hector's previous, unrelated probation. Hector had lost his job, his car, and custody of his daughter, and was sent to federal lockup for 5 years. Hector looked down at the former officer kneeling in the dirty water. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten him with a shiv. He simply smiled, a cold, terrifying smile that promised years of methodical, psychological torment. "You missed a spot, Connolly," Hector said softly. "The grease trap in the back is backed up. I want you to clean it out. Use a toothbrush. If it's not shining by lockdown, I'll report you for insubordination, and you'll spend the next month in the special housing unit." Connolly swallowed hard, his hands trembling. He was entirely at the mercy of the man whose life he had ruined. He had nowhere to run, no badge to hide behind, and no union rep to save him. "Yes, sir," Connolly whispered, his voice cracking. As Connolly crawled toward the rancid grease traps, the final, absolute twist of the knife arrived in the mail. During mail call that evening, Connolly received an envelope from the Federal Bureau of Prisons Financial Office. He tore it open with blistered hands. It was a notification of garnishment. The $2.5 million civil judgment that Arthur Sterling had won against Connolly and the town of Blackwood had not disappeared. While the town's insurance had paid out the bulk of it, Connolly was still personally liable for $250,000 of punitive damages. The letter coldly informed him that 80% of any money deposited into his prison commissary account by his estranged family, along with 80% of the meager 12 cents an hour he made scrubbing Hector Ramirez's grease traps, would be automatically seized by the federal government. Where was the money going? It was being deposited directly into the Sterling Justice Coalition, the exact legal fund Arthur Sterling had set up. Connolly sat on his thin, scratchy mattress, staring at the paper. The realization washed over him, drowning him in its absolute, inescapable irony. Every hour he spent on his hands and knees, scrubbing filth for a man he had falsely imprisoned, he was earning pennies. And those pennies were being forcefully taken from him to fund the legal appeals of other victims of police brutality. Derek Connolly was literally financing the destruction of his own legacy. He had built a cage for others, only to lock himself inside it, handing the keys to his victims. The badge is a symbol of public trust, not a shield for private tyranny. Derek Connolly learned that the universe has a ruthless way of balancing the scales when authority is abused. He hunted for a victim in the dark, only to handcuff his own destiny. True justice doesn't just punish the wicked. It strips them of their power, leaving them to live in the cages they built for others.